Right, so you guys sent in a ton of stuff about this Hunter Biden pardon thing. Seems like you want to dig a lot deeper than just the headlines, huh? We got, let's see, news reports, of course, legal analysis, even some pretty heated commentary clips. Looks like somebody's been busy.
It's definitely a story with some interesting parallels to history. To really understand the pardon's significance, I think we need to break it down. Like, look at the timeline, what the legal arguments are, and then obviously the political context.
Yeah, okay, so let's rewind a bit. Hunter Biden's legal problems, this isn't something that just kind of popped up out of nowhere, is it?
Right, no, you could argue that this whole thing started back around 2018 when Hunter Biden bought a gun while, he was struggling with drug addiction at the time. That led to federal charges, but honestly, that's just the beginning.
And then, of course, you've got the infamous laptop situation.
Yeah.
2019, 3 laptops left for repair, spilling all kinds of personal info, and well, that set the media on fire.
Exactly, and that kicked off a whole new level of scrutiny into his finances. Fast forward to September 2024, he pleads guilty to tax charges. Admitted to dodging, what was it, something like $1.4 million in taxes, all while living a pretty, let's just say, comfortable lifestyle.
So at this point, it seems like he's definitely facing some serious consequences.
Oh, absolutely. December 2024 comes around, and now he's staring down the barrel of potential prison time. Then, boom, out of the blue, President Biden issues a full pardon, not just for the tax charges either, but for anything, any potential offense going all the way back to 2014.
Wow, yeah. I mean, that's not just a pardon. That's like a decade-long get-out-of-jail-free card. It's a big deal and a pretty big change from what President Biden was saying just a few months ago. You even sent us some clips where he flat out denies that there's any chance of a pardon.
Yeah, we have recordings of him saying it will be a no. It is a no.
Yeah.
I mean, point blank, no way. And even the White House press secretary was on message, like repeatedly shutting down any talk of a pardon.
So, I mean, what changed between those denials and this massive pardon? Was it just a father protecting his son, or is there something, a deeper political play happening here?
Well, the stuff you sent over kind of gives us two different narratives. On one hand, you have President Biden's statement where he talks about, loving and supporting his son. He even says that he thinks the whole prosecution was politically motivated. And then we have Congressman Clyburn talking about the obligations a father has. I mean, it's hard to ignore that emotional aspect of it.
Right, that classic father standing by his son kind of thing. But some of the stuff you sent says that maybe this wasn't just about family. Maybe it was actually a calculated strategy. So what kind of evidence points in that direction?
Well, think about the timing. President-elect Trump is about to take office, and he's made it clear he wants to go after his rivals. And then you add in those laptop revelations, still kind of hanging over everything, and the potential, legal ramifications from all that. I mean, it's a lot.
So maybe this pardon is less about fatherly love and more about shielding Hunter Biden from, a Trump-led Justice Department, like setting up a legal firewall against whatever Trump might try to do.
That's exactly what some people are saying. By doing this blanket pardon now, President Biden basically neutralizes any legal threats, whether it's stuff from the laptop or investigations Trump might launch. It kind of heads it all off.
But, I mean, this whole thing raises some serious questions about, the justice system itself, doesn't it? You
Yes.
said this Dan Abrams' analysis, and he seems particularly concerned about this idea of selective prosecution.
Yeah, he's arguing that we need to think about whether Hunter Biden was treated any differently than, anyone else in a similar situation. Was the gun charge actually legit, or was it, politically motivated? And the same question applies to those tax charges.
So we got potential bias in the justice system and then a president potentially using his power to protect his son. It's kind of a disturbing picture, honestly.
And the even bigger issue is that all of this could erode public trust in the justice system. Does this pardon set some kind of dangerous precedent where people in power can just sidestep accountability?
And is this part of a larger pattern? I mean, we've definitely seen these kinds of controversial presidential pardons before, right? I think you mentioned Nixon earlier.
Exactly. To really grasp the weight of this pardon, I think we need to look at it in historical context, like presidential power, how it's been used, sometimes abused. Think about Nixon's pardon by Gerald Ford. That covered any crimes during his entire presidency. Extremely controversial, and some people say it cost Ford his reelection.
So are we seeing a repeat here? Could this backfire on Biden, maybe alienate voters who care about fairness and accountability?
Definitely possible, yeah. The full impact, that's still up in the air. But the political fallout could be huge. To really understand the potential consequences, I think we need to look at the Nixon pardon more closely. Like, what were the legal justifications? How did the public react? What were the long-term implications?
Yeah, because if history has taught us anything, It's that these kinds of decisions can have consequences for years to come. It's about way more than just Hunter Biden. It's about the balance of power, presidential authority, and public trust in our institutions.
Absolutely. It raises some fundamental questions like what's acceptable, what crosses the line, and are those lines always shifting? We have to look at those historical parallels to really understand what's at stake here.
Okay, let's do it then. Let's rewind the clock and see what lessons we can learn from those ghosts of pardons past. Stay with us.
So the Nixon pardon it's really interesting to look at because, well, just like Hunter Biden's pardon, it caused a huge controversy. But there's a big difference actually. Ford pardoned Nixon before any charges were even filed. His argument was that the country needed to heal after Watergate.
Oh, I see. So he basically pardoned Nixon preemptively to avoid a trial, hoping to, like, move the country past the whole thing. But didn't that kind of backfire on him?
It did, big time. A lot of people saw it as like an abuse of power, this backroom deal to protect Nixon from being held accountable. There was a huge public outcry. And most people agree that it's part of why Ford lost the next election.
So is Biden making the same mistake? Is he risking that same backlash, putting political strategy ahead of public trust?
Yeah, it's definitely a gamble. Things are different now, obviously, but the basic principle's the same. When a president uses the pardon power to help themselves or their people, it makes people question the whole system.
Yeah, that feeling that the system is rigged, that there's different rules for different people, that can be really damaging, especially when it comes from the people in charge.
Exactly. And that's why this whole Hunter Biden pardon is so important. It's not just about him, it's about the presidency, about how much power one person should have, and about, where the line is between personal loyalty and what's good for the country.
You were talking earlier about different types of pardons. Can you maybe explain that a little more? Where does the Hunter Biden pardon fit into all that?
Sure. So you have pardons that are just like personal favors. The president pardons a friend or someone they're close to just because they can. Then there are pardons that are more strategic, like the president pardons someone who could cause them problems, someone who might know too much, that kind of thing. And then you have pardons where, the president really believes that an injustice was done, that someone was wrongly convicted or deserves a second chance.
So where does Hunter Biden's pardon fall? It kind of seems like it could be both a personal favor and a political strategy, right?
That's what makes it so interesting and so controversial. It's hard to know for sure what the motives were. Is it just a dad protecting his kid? Or is it a president covering his tracks? Or maybe a bit of both.
It's messy, that's for sure. And it raises some pretty uncomfortable questions about, whether presidents are using this pardon power the right way.
It's a debate that's been going on forever. Like, how much power should a president have? What are the limits? Some people say that the pardon power is too broad, too easy to abuse. They want to see reforms, make it more transparent, have stricter rules.
So like checks and balances for the pardon power itself.
Exactly. But then other people say that, no, the pardon power is really important as it is. They say it's a way to protect against the courts being too harsh, to show mercy when the law is too rigid.
It's tough. I can see both sides.
Yeah. It all comes down to, like, a basic question. How much power should a president have, and when are they going too far?
And in this case, the stakes are really high. It's not just about Biden. It's about, setting a precedent for future presidents. Like, what message does this send about executive power?
It's going to be interpreted in different ways, obviously, depending on people's politics. Some people are going to see it as compassion, a dad doing what he has to do. Other people will say it's just raw power, protecting his own interests.
And like most things in politics, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, definitely. It's a reminder that, our system is based on this balance, this tension, different branches of government, individual rights versus the good of the whole. And sometimes these big events, they force us to really examine our values and, face some hard truths about power.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit here. We've been focusing on the history and the politics, but what about the legal and ethical side of all this?
Right.
You mentioned Dan Abrams talking about selective prosecution. Can we dig into that a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. Selective prosecution, it basically means that someone's being targeted not because of what they did, but because of who they are, like their political beliefs or who they're related to.
So in Hunter Biden's case, the argument is that he was prosecuted because he's the president's son. A political target, basically. But is there really any proof of that?
Well, that's where it gets tricky. Abrams says that proving selective prosecution is really hard. You have to show that they were treated differently than other people in the same situation, but also that it was done on purpose. because of who they are, not because of what they did.
That sounds pretty hard to prove.
It is. That's why you don't see a lot of selective prosecution cases. It's
Yeah.
not enough to just say someone was treated unfairly. You got to prove that there was a deliberate reason for it.
So even if it seems like Hunter Biden got special treatment, proving that it was political is a whole other thing.
Exactly. It's a complicated legal argument. You really have to look at all the evidence and, the whole context of the case.
And that brings us back to, I think, how the public sees all this. Even if you can't prove selective prosecution, the idea of it, just the appearance of favoritism, that can really hurt people's trust in the system.
Oh, absolutely. That's a big part of why this pardon is so controversial. It taps into this worry that we all have, like, is the system fair? Is everyone equal under the law? Or can powerful people just manipulate the system to get what they want?
It's a story that makes us think about some hard questions.
Yeah.
About power, loyalty, and whether justice is really blind or not.
It goes beyond just these specific people. It's about how our whole democracy works. It's about the institutions that we're supposed to rely on to keep things fair and orderly.
And this story's not over yet, is it?
Nope.
The fallout from this, part legally and politically, that's going to continue for a while, I think. Okay, so we've looked at the history, the legal arguments, the political side of things. Now we need to bring it back to you, the listener.
Right. You sent us all this stuff because you wanted to go deeper, to understand the whole picture, not just the headlines.
So take a minute to think about this. What really sticks with you about this whole story? What questions do you still have?
Yeah, like what does this pardon say about American politics right now? How is presidential power being used in the 21st century?
These are things we all need to be thinking about as, things get more and more complicated.
Yeah, and to do that, we need knowledge, we need perspective, and we need to be critical thinkers.
So we've been going over this pardon inside and out, but let's bring it back to you guys, the listeners.
Yeah, you obviously want to know more than just what happened, right? Like, well, what does it all actually mean?
You send in some pretty interesting commentary comparing this pardon to Trump's pardons of Roger Stone and Paul Manafort. Is this like a pattern or something?
It's definitely a similar thread running through them, yeah. You see, in all three cases, you've got the president using this pardon power to protect people who are, well, let's just say close allies, almost like extensions of themselves in a way.
So it's not really about justice then. It's more about, protecting your own. Like, hey, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of deal.
That's the perception a lot of people have, yeah. And it definitely doesn't help with public trust in the justice system, Whether that perception is always right, well, that's a whole other question.
It is pretty wild, though, that Trump and Biden, who are total opposites politically, both used this pardon power in ways that, helped them out personally or politically.
That's a really important point. It kind of suggests that this isn't just a problem with one party or one ideology. It's like a built-in problem with the presidency itself, a temptation that's always there.
So is there anything we can do about it? Can we actually change the pardon power so it's not so open to abuse?
That's the big question, yeah. And legal experts have been debating it for ages. Some people think we need stricter limits, like requiring more transparency or making presidents actually justify their pardons,
So checks and balances on the pardon power itself.
Exactly. But then there are others who say, no way, the pardon power is crucial as it is. They see it as protection against, the courts going overboard, a way to show mercy when the law just isn't flexible enough, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
For sure.
On the one hand, you don't want presidents abusing their power. But on the other hand, you don't want to take away something that can actually be used for good.
It's about finding that balance, and it's not easy. But, I think this deep dive has given you the background, the different arguments, all the stuff you need to understand this complicated issue.
And this isn't just about understanding history, right? It's about, what's happening right now and how things could be different in the future.
Yeah, you, the listener, you're in a unique position to keep digging into this. You've obviously shown that you're not satisfied with just the surface level, right?
So here's what we want you to think about.
What does this pardon tell us about how presidential power is being used today? Is it a necessary tool for justice, or is it more like a weapon, something that can be used for personal gain?
That's up to you to decide. We've given you the facts, the analysis, the historical context, all of it. Now it's your turn to think it through and figure out where you stand.
This goes way beyond just Hunter Biden, It's about the core of our democracy.
Yeah, it's about power, accountability, and making sure that justice really is for everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking those tough questions, keep digging deeper, and most importantly, never stop thinking critically.
Until next time, stay curious.